and a bunch of sport brats, which is the image from the outside, and I would imagine it is not far off the truth. It's just going nowhere, and the club is never going to move on unless these figures either buck their ideas up, which they're not going to because they're on crazy wages, or they get shipped out. So the most important is who they get rid of rather than who they bring in my opinion. Because, like you say, silverware is not going to happen. They don't deserve it. They need to rebuild for a long, long time.
Andrew, Andy Mack, talking about the rebuild, I mean, you said a lot of money needed for United. I'm going to ask this to Eastwood as well. We see Burnley dropping out of the top flight, and they are in serious financial issues. That's a, for like it's the crush has come on. There has been teams getting crushed because of financial debts, and it looks like Burnley are going to go out of business maybe in the next little while because they have some severe issues.
Yeah, I think the staggering amounts of money that you get now from the Premier League makes clubs gamble way too much in trying to secure that status again for the next year. They were so close to getting relegated last year. Heartbreak for them to go out to a club that's got more money that they could ever dream of at the moment, losing to Newcastle on the final day. Yeah, they obviously need a rebuild, but I don't think there's too many of the players that are currently there that would actually have to go. I think a lot of them have been there for a number of years. Yes, whether they can sign them on a contract or not, but the likes of Cornet and Weghorst and others that have come in late to try and save them will be moved on or not made permanent. But the core of that squad and the core of whether they continue with the current management system going down a league again, I think they would have it. If they can stay afloat, they'd have a serious chance at coming back at the first bump. If they don't, then they're in serious trouble. You can do this sort of leapfrog as the likes of Fulham have done in the last few years. Eventually, they probably will get the balance right of how much to spend when going up. But it's going to take them 2 or 3 goes probably to get that right. And Burnley, if they get it right in the first go, then they'll be fine, I think, financially. If they don't, serious trouble.
Isolt, finances are going to be very tight, and we see now, Spurs are they're going to try and push on because they have some good opportunities for next year. They have a very good squad, unless they start to lose players, because there are a few of those players from Spurs who will be very, very hot property come next season.
Yeah, and that is definitely the case. I think it also then comes down to, and perhaps it's something that ties in with what Andrew is saying about Man United to an extent. It's about if you have players in the top echelons that aren't performing in a club, then you have to get rid of them. From a Spurs point of view, it seems like there are players who seem to want to play for Conte. And from the idea of the likes of Harry Kane, he's not going to get the move he once thought he was going to, because City have obviously filled a gap they have. And I suppose then you look at, if you're not going to be the Man City or the Liverpool in your league, do you not want to be playing European football? Do you want to be team 3 or team 4? And it's a lot more of an attractive prospect than, let's say, being bought by the likes of Man United, where you're losing to Crystal Palace on the final day of the season. You're probably the biggest club in the world in terms of profile. And why would anyone want to go there? And that's a crazy position to be in. I think the only positive United, for example, can take from this season is that they will be rebuilding under a new manager who, no matter what he does, it cannot be this bad. In terms of finances for clubs, I think the point being raised about when a club is going down, there are obviously parachute and solidarity payments, but if your club is that financially mismanaged or badly managed at Premier League level, there is a serious issue there, and the issue is not solely on the club. We've discussed this before. The issue falls in with where the Premier League is not looking at this, because you're in the top echelons. There is no need for that. And I think also not just in the top levels, but the likes of Derby, like you can't justify their finances being the way they are.
Oh, that's very true. Andrew Flynn, just last word with you on this. I mean, we've seen, well, we know who's gone down. We know how the final table has finished up. But when we're looking at the English Premier League, it is very much a 2-horse race. I mean, those two teams, Liverpool, 18 points clear of Chelsea, 18 points clear, 21 points clear of Spurs. But yet, it's still regarded as, the number 1 league in the world.
Well, it's the number one league in the world in a number of aspects, but in terms of competitiveness, certainly is not. I mean, look, we have no idea quite how Chelsea are going to look over the next 6-12 months, I would say. The takeover being agreed is a settling aspect of some sorts, I guess, but how many of those players are going to stick around? Thomas Tuchel for now is still there. But if you consider that Chelsea are the nearest challengers, it's a seriously worrying prospect for the league as a whole. Manchester United are miles off, so write them off. Arsenal and Spurs will provide their competitive edge, who's going to finish in the top four, but realistically, the titles, I can't honestly see the title going anywhere other than City and Liverpool for the next 5, 6, possibly longer years. Depends on how Chelsea rebuild.
It is turning out to be a Scottish Premier League, and I don't mean that in disrespect, because you've got the two top teams who have the finance and the system to get the players in, and the brand to get the players in as well. Regardless of money, yeah. Man City, okay, they're wealthy, but they have managed it very, very well. For all the criticism we might have, but they've done very, very well.
Yeah.
And Mark, can you just throw up the table again, if you could, for one moment? Sorry, you put it up and I unfortunately cut you off. We're looking at that, right? And we're looking at West Ham finishing, okay, now they're in the UEFA Conference for next season. United luckily got into the Europa League. One quick question for each before we go out to break. Iseult, starting off ladies first, Kulusevski.
What a performance today. Keep him today, based on today, and I suppose it's the most recent memories that will matter the most to us. 2 very solid goals, and I suppose we're not. Let's face it, Levy isn't bringing anyone interesting in this year. So keep what we've got and hope that they continue to perform like they have for the last few matches. I'd be happy with that.
Andy Mack, for you, looking at I know you're at the bottom of the table as well. Looking at those teams who have gone down. Okay, we've got Norwich who are yo-yo. Watford, well, they're so-so, and Burnley are go-go, as if they're going out of business. Which of those 3 teams can come back up next year?
Really tricky one. I thought Watford actually signed some amazing players, and I thought the way that they were handled, obviously not seeing what's happening within the club and inside it. I mean, having watched Dennis run riot against Real Madrid for Club Brugge, I'd be absolutely shocked unless there is something seriously wrong with his mental capacity. I think big clubs should be looking at him. I think they'll struggle to hold on to a lot of the foreign players. I've got a decent contact who actually deals with the fitness side of a lot of the Spanish-speaking players at Watford. And a lot of them are extremely well looked after and have their own little community. Whether they stay or not, or whether their agent moves them all on somewhere else, is there to be seen. And that would then throw them into a real difficult decision about how their rebuild looks. Norwich, I think, probably accepted and have been looking at what's going to happen for the rebuild since about January. So if they're not ready for the rebuild, even after Dean Smith came in, I think he's probably appointed with that in mind. If they're not looking at top 6 finish next year, I'll be very shocked. Burnley, as you say, pivotal moment really for them. And until they fix that, their rebuild could be anything. Could be looking at another derby. Could be deducted points before they even get going. So out of the 3 of them, you would expect Norwich probably to perform the best going back in. Watford, if they retain some of those players, I think they could be, if they get the tic-tacs right, they could be looking at a Fulham-esque whipping season of goals galore. But they need to sort out their defence.
Andrew Flint, for you, just talking about the championship teams coming back up. So we know that Fulham were champions, Bournemouth promoted right away. There was of course Huddersfield, Notts Forest, Sheffield United, and Luton Town. Luton Town were kind of like everybody's favourite, shall we say, potential top team. Now, of course, next Sunday, the final is going on between Huddersfield and Notts Forest. Who do you reckon is going to come up out of the 2 of those? What's your take?
Well, I think the momentum of Forest is just so impressive since Steve Cooper took over. He clearly just understands the players. The players love him, and they have some seriously exciting players in that squad as well. I think Forest have a weight of history and expectation around them as well. Sheffield, pardon me, sorry. Sheffield United gave them a real scare, but Forest, you've got to remember I think this. I'm right in saying this is their first playoff final they've actually ever been in, and they are one of the last remaining Football League clubs to actually play at the new Wembley. So how they handle the pressure will be key. But I have a feeling they will go up, and I actually think they will. I think they will survive in the Premier League, not just because of their history and the size of the club, but because they've got a manager who is in demand, or certainly would have been in demand had they not made the playoff final. He wouldn't have remained a second-tier manager. So I think Forest are in the strongest position.
Okay, right, we're going to go to break right now. We're back in just, we're running slightly late, but still on time. So we wait for a moment. Everyone's going to mute their mics, and then we're back with European football roundup. Okay, we are back, folks, with part two. So I hope everyone is there with me. I know Issa was kind of flirting herself in this beautiful sunshine as she's coming back up to Dublin. Annie Mac, I'm going to start with you on this one. We had a good old Europa League final last week. There's a Europa Conference one coming up, Roma and Feyenoord. So tell us, who's going to win, Roma or Feyenoord?
Oh, pressure like that. Well, Roma, bookies' favourites. Not that easy for me. I think the sheer disappointment of Feyenoord getting close and then it all sort of falling apart at the end of the season up against Ajax in the Dutch league might have affected them a little bit mentally. I also think that Roma could take their foot off the pedal towards the end of the season as their European qualification had already been secured for next season. Again, Europa League. They were already out of touch of Juve in fourth. So going in terms of preparation, I think Roma have the edge at the moment. But Feyenoord got a few decent strikers. I think going to go a slim Roma win, something really dull like 1-0.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Issa, Cody, next to you, Roma with your former boss, Jose Mourinho, or Feyenoord?
I'm going to agree with Andy and go with Roma. I just think maybe I'm viewing it that I think probably the standard of competition they've been up against domestically and the level they've been performing at, even though their position in the league is actually further down comparatively. I think the standard they're up against might have them better prepared. But again, do I think we're going to have a match that is in any way as exciting as the final we had last week? Now, exciting in terms of the competitive aspect of it, or as exciting as the final we'll have in the days following? No. I think this is, out of the finals, this is probably the weakest, not just because the competition is admittedly for the lower down teams, or lower down in terms of ranking. But I still think the point that was raised a few weeks ago is very interesting. In terms of prize money, this is as lucrative for the winner and in terms of the benefit to them.
Very true. I mean, remember Feyenoord, they have a European Champions before. They've twice won. It's 20 years this year since they won their last UEFA Cup, which is Europa League. They've won two UEFA Cups, Europa Leagues. Andrew, I mean, we have to at least give a little bit of a nod to Feyenoord because they're coming from a decent league. They're not like, this isn't like a pub league like, I don't know, the Belgian league or the Bundesliga.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's one name at Feyenoord that stood out for me for a few years. A friend recommended me that I watch this guy, Luis Sinisterra. I've not watched him as much as I'd like, but he's lightning quick and he's going to be a danger man for them. They certainly have difference makers in there. I think most people will assume, and I would be include myself in one of them, that Roma are the favourites, and for the reasons that Gisela and Andy Mack have mentioned. I think it's going to be fascinating, not really in the quality, well, the entertainment value of the final, but more who copes with the mental aspect of it, because there's so much more pressure on Roma. For a club of their size, they have barely been in European finals. I think the last final they were in was it the 1984 European Cup final against Liverpool? They haven't won a European trophy except since 1961, and they've only won 3 Serie A titles. And yet they had 70,000 fans in their own stadium for the semi-final. They've got a striker bang in form in Tammy Abraham. So people will expect, probably because they're a slightly bigger name, that Roma will be the favourites, but Feyenoord have got nothing to lose, and they have more pedigree in history. So I think it's going to be an interesting tactical and mental battle.
No, I agree with you on that, because I do. Again, like we're knocking down Feyenoord. We're looking at okay, they've got Roma have got like three titles, 3 Serie A titles. They've won the cup. They're kind of a cup team, so they do well in that. I think they've maybe 10 Serie Cup Italias. But as you said, they haven't won anything. I think they didn't. I think they won the old UEFA Cup or something back in the 60s. So I mean, this is not a huge team. Of course, an interesting one. Of course, Issa, I want to ask you on this because we discussed this before on the radio. This is about players who are leaving, for example, Russian clubs to go play in Europe, like like they were allowed to leave. And Feyenoord have 2 players. They have George Hendricks and Gus Thiel, were both, I'd say, on loan from Spartak Moscow. What could be after this for these players? I mean, like if it's kind of a strange one, because as I was told yesterday, excuse me, that this could be grounds in the future for Roma to actually appeal if they lose, because this is like a temporary basis. And they said, well, actually, these players shouldn't be playing UEFA competition, just in domestic competition, because of the wording of the decree from UEFA.
I suppose you can be very, very technical. This falls down with anything legal. I suppose we also saw teams threatening to take legal action depending on how things had ended up in the Premier League. If certain teams were making their veiled threats about how other teams were being run and financially, that they could take a claim. In the specific instance that UEFA had laid out in terms of players being able to transfer outside of Russia, while there is an argument to be made as to whether they should be confined in terms of their competitive status, so which competitions you can play in. It's similar to in rugby, you have to name a squad almost. But because these guys were coming in under a unique exception, were they limited? The difficulty in taking a claim isn't about whether or not the wording says something. The difficulty in taking a claim, if they were to be successful against Roma, is optics. And in every legal situation, even if you have everything on your side or you have a very arguable claim, the big issue will come down to optics. And unfortunately, I think from that perspective, Roma would probably be better placed if that scenario played out, not to take that claim. Now, I know you could argue, oh, there's huge money involved, etc. But we see how sponsorship agreements are very sensitive on certain issues at present. I would think that if you were to take a claim, it's something that legal advisors would say, what are you actually losing? What are the damages? Let's get the quantifiable amount for that, and let's see what the potential risks are in taking a claim. Because there's no guarantee, even if you feel the law or the rules in this case and regulations that have been put in place are on your side, there's never a guarantee of success. And sometimes there has to be a judgment call made. I also think you're playing out a what-if scenario where you then come down to, Roma might say, this is how we're interpreting it, where it could be a case of saying, oh, actually, how we intended it to be read was, and then you're going against a governing body, which is a difficult position, in my opinion, in any situation.
No, I agree. Now, look, it's very, very difficult. I'm going to wrap up just one last thing. I'm going to stay with Isold on this. Isold, how are Cork going to get on against the winners of Antrim and Kerry after their terrific win today over Tipperary? Of course, they destroyed Tipperary in Tipperary. I mean, it's very rare that happens, but it happened already. How many? 4 times this year already? For Tip, I mean, losing.
Look, never did I think that I would have to worry about the fact that Tip might need to do a playoff against Kerry at some point to determine whether or not we can stay within our competition. A magnificent performance for Cork today, and I think perhaps it's like with any league where you have a competition. If you have, so in our case, Munster Championship is so strong a competition that a team that I feel has some great players that if they were playing maybe in a different province, they'd be winning a cup. They're bottom of it. But the thing we really need to remember here is while Cork might have won, I was sitting beside a Cork man who managed to miss out on Liverpool winning. So who's the real winner today?
if he doesn't drive that car into a wall, he's a better man than me. He's a much better man than me.
He's very mature.
All right. Well, I guess you have to have a bit of revenge after being left out in the rain all day, so we have to allow that. Okay, we're going to go to another quick break, and then we're coming back, of course, with let's just say some interesting sports stories of the week, ones that are going to make us all think just a little bit harder. Okay, we are back. I'm going to ask each one of you, I've got 4 stories to go through. So I'm going to ask you each to have a look at them and not to sort of gasp or to fall apart with it. First one, I'm going to stay with you because you're the person who brought this up, actually, and this is particularly for you. The ATP and Wimbledon have confirmed that no ranking points will be given to Wimbledon due to the discrimination. Now, the ATP put out a very strongly worded statement. They said, the ability for players of any nationality to enter tournaments based on merit and without discrimination, and this is the most important, without discrimination, is fundamental to our tour. So that's it's a big move for both the men's and women's tour organizations to take, isn't it?
It's the strongest move I think we've seen. And we discussed this previously, tennis is an individual sport, save where you obviously have doubles. I think it is in a unique position that team sports aren't in. And I think it is an extremely, extremely strong position to say, because what they're not advocating here for is for either side. They're advocating for their athletes, and perhaps that's something that we can't, for other reasons, see in other sports. But it's a very important stance to see, and it's strong.
I'll add something, just like it's like as most of our viewers know, and you guys know, like I've worked with tennis players for many years, and still in contact with many of them. We have our WhatsApp chats as well, and there's one there's one chat where I'm in where there are 8 different nationalities: Ukrainian, Russian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Croatian, and Irish, Ireland, and German as well. Sorry, and they're all female tennis players. And when this announcement was made by Wimbledon, they immediately reacted. Now there had been chat about it. There had been, they had messaged her like it's bad. They had all said, "Look, we don't like what's happening. We don't like what's happening." But at the same time, they all got about, because many of them, they've toured together, they've played doubles together. Annie Mac, is this a good thing or a bad thing, though, that the points are taken away? Will it make a difference? Because the ATP weren't so strong on Novak Djokovic, for example.
I think potentially going forward, it's a good thing. The fact that it maybe lays down a marker to other major Grand Slams and tournaments that if this kind of thing's going to happen, you're taking out top seeds, then the points that you're getting are then based on those people not playing. And then it then skews and muffs up the other tournaments that they're involved in later on, where you're then getting, the players that haven't been involved and then seeded lower and ending up, skewing the tournament slightly in a way that they're then playing other, the sort of middle ranking seeds earlier rather than the lowest ranking ones. And then are you going to get issues of them going, okay, well, my prize money should have perhaps been this, but I've ended up playing this guy who's dropped in the ranking points, who should be first, second, third, fourth. So you're creating an issue by then bringing them back in if you allow the ranking points for that tournament to go ahead. So in that regard, I think it's a good move. They've taken it away. At the same time, are you now going to have players going into it going, well, if there's no ranking points involved in this, are they going to play differently? Are they going to take it as seriously? So there's that issue as well. But I think personally, I think it's a good thing.
Okay, because we know the Roland Garros that's going on. The first round was I think played today. The qualifications have already been completed on Friday, I think it was, or Saturday. So there are some of those matches actually live at the moment. Andrew Flint, your last word on this one. I mean, it is, fair play has been done in this, because the FEDJO, for example, said that for all the basically if a player makes a statement on any way, shape or form, or in any way, shape or form, they say they're either for this or against this, they will be disciplined. That seems to be a better way to take it, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely, I do, because it's it's what the stereotypical line that a lot of people trot out that is just unrealistic, saying sport and politics should mix. We know that in theory we would like that, but it's just not realistic. But by doing this, you're basically protecting the players. They may just accidentally be proud or say something without really meaning to push a political angle and drop themselves in hot water. Whereas by doing this, by saying, look, we're basically giving you a warning, we're helping you out here, just stay clear for the tournament, and it works both ways, then it's taken off the table completely. I think it's a cleaner way round to do it, because you're not telling somebody what they must believe or support, or even for only just for the 2-3 weeks of the tournament. And I think that's the whole point. It should be as much about the sport as possible, and this is one way to do it. So I think it's a sensible way around to do it that way.
Yeah, for example, Sasha Sasnovich, the Belarusian player, she won. Now, she's playing under a neutral flag, and she won today. She beat a Chinese opponent, and afterwards there was a question put to her about like, oh, what do you think? And she said, like, it's not my place to comment on Wimbledon, on what they've taken the decision. Like, privately, I will say something else, but publicly, it's their tournament. They can say they can do what they want. Next topic. This is interesting. I just want to get a quick take from Ollie, because, of course, this is a strange one, because we all follow football. We know what sports are like, and in the San Francisco Giants fans, we call the worst league after a baseball, and an empty bottle was thrown onto the field at players. Now, of course, back in 2008, there was one bottle that was hit Mike Piazza, the catcher. He basically pointed out who hit him, and the guy was then arrested and given 30 days in jail and a further 3 years suspended sentence, or 3 years probation. I'll start with Andrew Flint. Andrew Flint, I mean, football fans are the worst, aren't they?
They certainly are there. I mean, look, the throwing objects onto a pitch, if it is in any way possible, and nowadays with the amount of CCTV and the amount of security that around, it should be pretty much possible to ascertain who has done it. I would come down very hard, regardless of the sport, the person, the occasion. It doesn't matter, because safety really can come into it. Football fans, I think a really odd trend has, well, I say odd, I've noticed a trend in the last 5-10 years of seemingly more aggressive behaviour in stands again. And what really frightens me is, I mean, we've seen a lot of fans indulging in pitch invasions recently, and it's happening more and more often, and in seemingly less dramatic circumstances as well. It doesn't take much to get fans right up close to players. This is actually starting to get serious. And I worry that attitudes against football fans are just going to get worse and worse and worse. But, I mean, they can't be blameless in this. They are launching things, objects, onto the pitch. I mean, I remember.
Andrew, I think we're having some difficulties trying to get you in. So, Iseult, I'm going to move on to you. Back in 2014, a player when he's playing against an Algerian team, Kabylie, Albert Bojongo, he was struck in the head with an object that was thrown from the stands. His team lost, and he then taken to hospital and died. It is something that's been happening. What we saw with Crystal Palace this week, for example, when an idiot came on to try to fight Patrick Vieira of all people.
Yeah, I think, and we have to look at the last week in football alone. We've seen obviously pitch invasions. Pitch invasions are one thing. Throwing objects is another. As Andrew rightly pointed out, the level of CCTV, the level of ability to identify these people is huge. The ability to give long-term bans to players, but also the ability to really crack down on clubs so that they make those people undesirable at games. Like, there's a difference between people bringing coins and throwing them on to objects like a bottle you get in the stand. Like, people are bringing in objects with the thought of throwing it at someone. You're not sitting there going, this I may or may not do. I think the other huge problem we're seeing with football in particular and fans in football is there is violence perpetrated towards players. So let's say if you go to boxing, a lot of the fights are between fans in the crowd. There's very little aimed at the actual participants. And that the level of aggression that football fans, as Andrew also said, have shown in the last few years at a time when security is at its highest is very, very worrying. Like Everton celebrating not being relegated to end up having Vieira trying to get across a pitch. How a Premier League manager did not have security around him at that minute is insanity. Today there was an incident where it appears, and it's online at present, if you go on Twitter, it looks like the Villa keeper was assaulted trying to get off the field in a game where his team lost. Like, it's insanity.
Andy Mack, I'm going to ask you on this one because my fervent belief is in the last few years we've seen it. We saw it last year, for example, the European Championship final in London. Not just alcohol, it's cocaine.
Well, I think it's kind of irrelevant what it is. I mean, we saw the final at Wembley, fans storming in the ground to try and get in. We've seen Billy Sharp getting, thankfully, not headbutted properly by a fan coming onto the pitch after his team lost, because that could have been a lot more serious. You've actually all ruined my hot topic for the week. I think they should just shut grounds at this point. I think the league association has to step in and say, if you're going to, I mean, we discussed this the other week. I think in sports where there's segregation between fans, and they can't behave themselves even then. So when you're then having pitch invasions at the end, it's like this spillover of aggression, and I think it largely comes from social media allowing people to hide behind this sort of practically anonymous thing, even though your name and all your details are all over it. It then gives people, I think, an excuse when they're in a crowd, when this mob mentality takes over. People somehow seem to forget that the CCTV and all of this isn't there, and they just act absolutely abominably. And yeah, we've seen 3 cases now in the space of a week and a half, and I think they need to take serious action. And I was quite happy that the Billy Sharp incident in the playoff in England between Forest and Sheffield United, the guy was jailed within 48 hours. That's the quickest I've ever seen that reaction. And that needs to happen more because, as you're saying, people can end up dying. People can end up being severely injured. And in most of these cases, these are players that have lost. It's not even they're doing it out of like, oh my God, we've lost to you. It's just pure hatred.
Look, I've always said that it's the same as when we had it, when it happened in the Oscars. When you're on stage, you don't expect someone to come up at you. When you're on the field as a player, the worst thing I ever had was, or one of the worst things I had was like in a cup match in Ireland, going to take a throw in, and this was a schools game. I'm going to take a throw in and running with the ball to take a throw down the line, and somebody just launching an apple butt and to hit me in the back. And I got the fright of my life. I literally thought I was going to die for a second because it hurt, but also it was that. What was that? And I dropped the ball, turned around, and the guys who were there they had a great laugh. But again, I've seen it at Dalymount Park back in the 80s where scissors being thrown onto the pitch at a Polish keeper. So I mean, no one's immune to it. You're right about cocaine. I think it's just this like idiocy that breaks through. We're going to go very quickly on to the next one and bring Andrew Flynn back. Just a word from each of you on this. This is Wagatha Christie, which is an interesting court case going on. We'll cover it next week. The verdict should be out, I think, on Tuesday. Who's going to win Andrew Flint? This between Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. So who's going to win? Rebecca or Colleen?
Neither of them in the court of public opinion. I mean, just the comments that are coming out of this, basically making both of them sound rather silly. I mean, Colleen Rooney trumpeted her intelligence at being a super sleuth a few years ago with that infamous sting operation that led to the whole Wagatha Christie tag. I think realistically, she actually has half a point, because whether it was Rebecca Vardy or her agent, whoever it turns out has actually leaked the stories to the Sun. You can't untie yourself.
I just said Colleen Rooney was planting fake stories on to only people she knew, and the only person she had not blocked on her Instagram, just like in a small group, was Rebecca Vardy. And all these stories then started to come out because she was wondering who was leaking these stories and who was like talking with.
But I mean,
and it was Vardy.
The one key thing, though, I don't know if you everybody else noticed this or picked up on it at the time. That was 3 years ago when she sent that first message, and she was very, very careful. I thought this was interesting. She carefully worded it, saying it was Rebecca Vardy's account. Even then, she said that clearly she'd taken legal advice to use that wording. There's no way. I mean, with nicest possible respect to Colleen Rooney, I don't think she would have had the legal nous to think that far ahead by herself. So she was already clearly planning for this to get to this stage, to get to a legal court.
I think herself and Wayne, like Wayne said, he didn't know anything about it. I do think he did. I think it was well planned out. And Andy Mack, with you on this, I mean, they've lost. There was a telephone was dropped into the North Sea. There was a laptop was destroyed and stolen and rendered useless. This is British cycling all over, isn't it?
I think Andy Flint should take them on a pedalo as far as he can and watch them capsize. I really couldn't care less who wins, who loses. I don't want to read Jamie and Rebecca Vardy's WhatsApp chat from 2016 about who said what to whom in the dressing room of what. Could not care. Capsize them. Get rid of them.
Send all of them down to Davy Jones' locker.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's because she said this is the whole thing. It's like a Dave Jones' locker, and Colleen didn't actually, Rebecca Vardy didn't know who it was. Iseult, for you, they've likened this to the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. There's a lot of money involved in this. There was Peter Andre was absolutely destroyed in this, completely ridiculed by Jamie Vardy's wife. Who's going to win?
The lawyers, they're coming out of this well. I think in the court of public opinion, Colleen Rooney, I know the comment Andrew made was very, very accurate about saying it's Rebecca Vardy's account, because I suppose a lot of celebrities are quite well aware of the fact that they don't necessarily always run their own accounts, or you may have other people who have access to it. So cleverly worded, definitely, and I don't think that came from her herself. I think there is an interesting, from a sports perspective, outside of the fact that Rebecca Vardy feels the need to waste the court's time, and Colleen has actually publicly said and under oath said that on 3 separate occasions she tried to settle this, despite obviously feeling she could be vindicated because of the fact that she didn't feel it was worth basically airing their dirty laundry, and also a waste of court's time, which it is. I think there is some interesting sub-discussions within what we've heard. Obviously, it's now concluded. In terms of the England team dynamic, and my favourite part of the entire trial was not the Davy Jones's locker comment, which I thought was brilliant by the counsel representing Colleen. It was in fact when Wayne Rooney had to talk about the awkward discussion he had to have with a teammate, being Vardy, about his wife FaceTiming into the games room they were all as a team relaxing in when they were at the World Cup. Because all I could think was, if we're talking about teammates and awkward discussions about partners, we all know which teammate we're thinking of. There's only one John Terry. So Look, it's
Right.
been enjoyable. It's been an enjoyable
We'll move
trial.
on. Okay, the final one, talking about like awkward conversations and absolute car crashes in every sense. Tiger Woods had to pull out of the PGA Championship. It's going to be decided today. Ireland Seamus Power is doing very, very well on it. Now, Tiger's a guy who basically played on one leg and won the 2008 US Open. Andy Mac, with you on this one, Tiger, is it, is he ever going to get in the woods? Is that it? Like, has he just finished?
Yeah, I think he should take his last drop ball and walk away while he's still got a tiny, weeny fragment of some sort of pride in the sport left after at least making a comeback. I mean, full credit to him for getting fit after what was a horrific injury.
And we reported it on the time. We were live on air, and it broke, and we had like, I think that same time as February last year. So it was amazing that he got out of that bloody thing alive.
Yeah, and he gave it a go. He got himself to a point where he thought he could do it again, and I think you have to tip your topless, whatever you call it, golf cap to that. But now I think it's quite clear that he's nowhere near the level, and perhaps he should go and give bad advice to other up and coming stars.
Eastland, there was a funny one I remember at the time, and it was also kind of nasty but funny in a way. Padraig Harrington, the Irish player, was saying about, like, he used to feel bad for Tiger Woods, that he was like, when all of them were sitting down in the bar having a drink or having a laugh or playing pool. Actually, he was saying Tiger Woods used to just go off on his own and up to his room. And then, of course, Padraig added, well, actually, at the time we thought he was just there on his own. Ha ha ha. So this it doesn't look good for Woods. It is time to call it a day. I mean, he finished his third round 9 over par.
But he made the cut, and I think that needs to be remembered. I also think, to an extent, one of the big problems with Woods' comeback is going to be, if he continues to play, is that he will need to be specific as to the courses he can endure. Because if he's making the cut, that means he's good enough to make it through 2 days, essentially. The problem is, with an injury that's that severe and that the recuperation is still underway, trying to walk that much. Like, I walk a lot, and I think if you factor in the injuries he has to compound it, when he's also rotating his body, he needs to be looking at courses that are essentially, in the nicest possible way, Denmark. Flat, minimal exertion outside of the game, because he's clearly still able to get to that level in his game, and we saw that even a few weeks ago with his first return tournament. But I think it's 4 days is obviously that bridge too far, and it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to watch. Do you know what? It's an amazing ability. Whatever you think about Woods outside of his personal life and all of the other stories we've over the years had to hear about, the mental strength to come back and play again is insanely impressive.
Listen, there's no two ways about it. He I'd have always asked questions about like what he used and so on, but at the same time, he had the natural raw talent. Now, he was pushed from an early age. It was a terrible situation that he found in. His father was an absolute horror show, like Richard Williams, but at the same time, how he stayed, how he was normal, like in any way, and I was very proud to have seen him play actually up in Canada over 20 years ago now. And even then, people were talking, he's awesome. I didn't know who he was from Adam, but Andrew Flint, time for Tiger to put the driver away in every sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can well imagine him coming back for exhibition matches in the future. His brand is still a brand. I mean, again, like you mentioned, it's not a squeaky clean career or personal character, but there's just so many mitigating circumstances, and his mental strength is quite phenomenal, and that is still worth something in the future. I would like to see him not disappear completely from the public eye, but from professional competition, look after himself, but come back for some exhibition matches. Maybe he'll be involved in future Ryder Cups in an advisory role in some sense, just an inspirational figure for younger players. Who knows? I don't think he should be lost from the sport for good, but professionally, what more has he got to prove? He's proven everything on a sporting front.
Yeah, I mean, he has nothing left to prove, and I think now it's a battle with himself. I think that's where the situation is at right now. Okay, so folks, we will wait for a very, very short break and come back for our hot takes, our hot stories of the week, and our opinions as well. Okay, we're back on with our sporting hot topics. So, folks, fire away. I'm going to allow Andrew Flint, who jumped out in the couple times today. So, Andrew, it is over to you to start off with your sporting hot topic of the week.
Well, we've all touched on this already a little bit, but I think it is such an important one. It's the safety of players and pitch invasions in particular. Andy Mack mentioned the Billy Sharp incident. It was chilling, to be honest. I mean, when you see pitch invasions, you see a lot of bravado and the drunken fans come on and they're sticking two fingers up at players. Oh, let's see if I get a selfie. And it's concerning, but it's not. A lot of the time the incidents are not physically dangerous, but this was that was just chilling. The guy was knocked out straight cold. But another side of it I wanted to highlight in particular was the after the Crystal Palace Everton game, when the Everton fan confronted Patrick Vieira. Now Patrick Vieira was in the middle of the pitch, in the middle of a crowd which he didn't want to be in. An Everton fan goading him in the face. Now I'm not trying to pick on Everton as a club here, just simply this particular fan. Vieira, lashes out a leg at him, and I don't know the extent of injuries if there were any, but when you're under pressure like that, when thousands of fans in occasions like this are breaking the law by entering the pitch, who's right and who's wrong? Well, nobody wins at it. The security simply has to be better. Now, how can the security be better? Do you simply line more stewards around the pitch? Will that realistically stop a surge of thousands of people? It's very hard to say that. So if you really do want to keep people off the pitch, I worry we go back to the 1980s. Cages, fences.
Well, look,
I mean, how far do we go? That to me is a serious issue, but something needs to change because this is getting worse.
I go back to what Andy Mack said earlier on, and Lisa's put into our work chat a situation. There was a pitch invasion in Semple Stadium today. Very regularly at half time in matches in rugby and in Gaelic games around the world, you'll have kids on the pitch at half time. You'll have people coming onto the pitch after the match, and Andy Mack and I discussed this on Friday, where there is no aggression, no violence. Sometimes there could be, but again, the fans have spent the whole game sitting together, rugby. So, I mean, it is a different situation. But again, yeah, Esau, you're right. In hurling, they have like big lumps of stick, to beat people with. And I agree with you fully. I do think something has to be done, and I think it goes maybe to the culture of the whole game. Andy Mack, I'm going to come to you. I know we've stolen your thunder on this because you had this as a topic. So now you have to go up with something even better first tonight.
Well, aside from that, and I've actually just seen the video of the Aston Villa goalkeeper getting punched going across, and he even has a steward and two stewards with him while he's being escorted away while he gets punched or slapped in the face. So yeah, big thing that I think needs to be addressed. The other two topics that I came across this week that I thought were quite interesting was first one, although it's not so much a physically draining sport, I did notice the Formula One ramming up how great it was that the hot conditions being back in Barcelona today to make it more challenging for drivers. And my immediate thought was, if the media is saying that let's make it these extremities for professional athletes or drivers in this case is such a great thing, looking forward to something like Qatar and the sort of crazy weather that we've had over the last year or two, I think this is something that's going to go forward where are we putting people at risk with extreme heat, not looking after them? We were promised Qatar would be fully aircon stadiums and yada yada yada. I mean, we saw in Seville the extreme heat. I saw one of the games in Italy. Florence played in an evening game. The players were sweating buckets after 10 minutes. Water breaks aren't really, water breaks every 25 minutes with the intensity that football's played at these days. The sort of training and the fact in cricket and Formula One, people are wearing helmets, can't stop for a drink. Then you've got all kinds of sports. If the media is pushing this narrative of let's make it more intense and more dangerous what on earth were they doing? And my last quick topic of the week was I thought it was very brave to see a rugby player and a football player come out as gay this week, and I think it's a big forward step. However, after seeing this absolutely insanity of pitch invasions, if that's what's going to happen, are they making a target for themselves? If this is the kind of thing that's now acceptable around sport, I thought it was extremely brave of them to make that step forward. I think the first to do so in the UK, me and Mr. Flint were covering this earlier in the week. First to do so in the UK for about 25 years for football. Huge step, and I think they should be applauded for being the ones that are likely to take the most stick until we get over this chapter of it not being an allowed thing within male and female sport.
Male sport, Andy. Let's and in certain types of sport as well, because in female sport, no one in tennis, for example, even football, there's no comments going from the stands when the Chelsea star players hug and kiss each other. No one says a word. It is a very, very strange thing, seen as a weakness, and we've Isel can mention this even better than me, where we had like a former Irish international saying that gays don't really play rugby. They're better in like sort of the entertainment or art, or maybe as hairdressers. Again, we hear the abuse given to men and shout at them that they would always be the subservient, that if you're gay, you're somehow weak, that you're a woman. And it just that ridiculous, stupid thing that comes out. I mean, Jake Daniels, when he came out, the Blackpool player, coming out as gay, he shouldn't have to. He shouldn't have to say a word. He should just go and live his life as what it is. But I know for myself, from speaking with former, well, he's now retired, professional player who's playing in Russia, and speak with him about being gay and why would he not come out. And his answer was, why should I? For who am I coming out? And I said, would you be bothered about it in the dressing room? And he said, no. He said, they know. Like, we've been out, like when there's like the husbands and wives, I bring in my partner and there's no problem. But as he said, that he might not be signed with another club, because again, the people in charge of the money hall think, well, if he's gay, he might be a bit weak. He might be. It's just ridiculous thing. So I agree with that. I think it's a great one, and no, well done for pointing it out. Isel, last one to you before we run out into the Big Fat Filthy quiz. So over to you.
I'm going to segue very strangely from what is a very important story, I suppose, for young people. As Andy has pointed out, I suppose it shouldn't have to be a thing where you need to say it, but also it is trying to perhaps make young people feel calmer in the fact, or more secure in the fact, that it shouldn't matter to you being a professional athlete or not. I'm segueing from there to more golf and Saudi Arabia, of all places. So it transpires that while we have seen Saudi sports washing be quite successful in Newcastle, who are about to have pretty much a replica of the Saudi national team's jersey as their alternate kit, we are seeing in the sport of golf the Saudi efforts, led primarily by Greg Norman, to sports wash are actually proving extremely unsuccessful. So this week in the PGA Tour, Phil Mickelson would have been due to defend his win from last year, and last year he became the oldest player to win a Masters at 50 and 11 months and a number of days, which were significant. But he didn't turn up this year because of the fallout of a controversy that has basically gone on for most of the year, since early February, when comments he made about the Saudis and their breakaway tour came out. And even down to this weekend, we've seen Sergio Garcia, who last week said how much he couldn't wait to be finished with the PGA Tour, being booed on a hole because basically he's one of the players who is confirmed now essentially as moving to the breakaway Saudi Tour. And it's a really interesting dynamic to see in a sport like golf, which again is it's completely individual, save for one-off tournaments like the Ryder Cup, that there seems to be a big gap between the players who are openly coming out and saying, actually, no, we're not going to take Saudi money. Yes, it might be astronomical. We're already being highly paid anyway. But to see players appear to take, whether it's a moral stance or one based on decent PR advice, but they're coming out and they're being quite vocal in the fact that they won't play in the Saudi tournament. And it may be Saudi Arabia's, as a state, their one sports washing attempt that they probably thought would be easily successful due to the amount of money and the individual players, but it is actually turning into a big talking point in golf, and it's turning into something where we are seeing even retired players coming out now and making their views quite publicly known. Nick Faldo over the last 24 hours when commenting on the Phil Mickelson situation. But in comparison with football, there seems to be a moral compass that, whether, again, as I said, it may be PR driven, but a moral compass that does exist for these individual players, that they're willing to talk about it. And I think that's interesting. We haven't heard a Newcastle player come out and say, actually, I've thought about it. This is a difficult area for me. It's a grey line here with Saudis. And I think it's interesting to see in a sport like golf that doesn't strike anyone as one that would be so strong on an issue, to see fans even booing a player, which is very un-golf-like, put it that way. But to also see that months on, Phil Mickelson, his comments have been so poorly received that he hasn't even been able to defend his title in one of the biggest tournaments. And he has his following, for anyone who has ever attended a tournament that Phil has played in, his followers are insane. He could be driving on a par 5 and they're shouting, "Get in the hole, Phil," because they have an insane belief. And they're different to any other group of fans. I've been to way too many golf tournaments. But to see that level of turning against him, and especially against an American where he feels he can't participate in an American tournament, it's interesting. And it might be a turn to some extent in how we see the Saudi efforts in sports washing. Even if it's only in one sport, it's a big step and it's a positive one.
Okay, I'm used to that because, again, I always say, like, I worked for 2 years in Saudi Arabia, so I can't turn around and say, no, it's all bad. I don't agree with how the country is governed. I don't agree with how the treatment of people, when we talk about, slave workers and so on, I think I said to Andy Mack before, when you go into Saudi Arabia, your passport is taken away. You have to ask to get it back if you want to leave the country, and only your employer will decide if you can leave. I'm, a white Irish person. And if you're a person from Bangladesh, for example, it's a whole lot worse, and you get a whole lot worse paid, worse conditions. So, yeah, I think it is definitely the right direction. Okay, we're over time. We have a few minutes left, so we're going to run through now and get the Big 550 quiz. So we'll be back in just a moment with Big 550 quiz, a new format. Okay, we are back, and I hope you enjoyed with this evening, and we're going to have a little bit more fun this evening, and slightly different for our guys tonight. We only have, there's 3 of them, but Iseult is there somewhere. She removed herself from the stream, now I'll add her back in, so she's back, better than ever. Okay, I'm going to say ladies go first, okay? So ladies go first in this one. You're going to have... this is a photo round, okay? So instead of sound, because I got complaints from people who watched it back and said, like this a few weeks ago, said, "Alan, don't do the Big 50 quiz with sound, but not right now." I said, okay, fair enough. So do it with photos. And it'll be
were the complaints from us?
Because they should have been.
Yeah.
It should be about us.
That's very true. Do you know, it's the worst thing I ever have to do is to listen back to sometimes I listen back to old shows from radio, and then I just hear, when I remember the moment when everyone started to laugh and I was trying to be serious. I tried to keep a serious voice on, and I never could do it. But anyway, right, here we go. First question is for Isolt. Who is this wrestler for 5 points? Who is?
I'm going to say that wrestler is Yamamoto Sushi Osho Sumo Oto. I've got nothing. I'm going to call him the Little Red Lotus.
Oh, sorry. It's
Please let it be
Yokozuna.
true.
Yokozuna. And by the way, as far as I remember, pardon?
I think my first attempt sounded quite similar.
I'll give you a point. I'll give you a point. As far as I remember, I could be wrong. He is related to The Rock. Different body types, but there we go.
If The Rock let himself go.
It could be The Rock as we know him. All right, here we go. Next one it's Andrew Flint. Who is this person?
Oh, Christ, his name's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, come on. I know who this is. He's slightly after my time, if there was such a thing as. Oh, what is his bleeping name?
3 seconds. Come on. You got your glasses off to see him more clearly. So
Randy Orton. I know it's probably not, but Christ, I've no idea.
No, it's not. It is Razor Ramon.
Oh,
yeah. I actually Scott. My goodness, I forgot now his real name. Scott something. He passed away a couple of weeks ago. Okay, Andy Mack.
Just like your good self here, Alan, I believe that is Mr. Perfect.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good.
Obviously, you would wear that a lot better than he does.
Yeah.
Next show, Alan. Next show.
Yeah, I was. If I wore that, I think people would be. Yeah, they'd be not losing their minds. They'd lose their breakfast, not their minds. Does anyone know his real name?
I'm going to go with
Bob.
No.
Brad. I'm going to go with he's a Brad.
No. Andy?
We just.
I went with Alan Moore. I mean,
yeah. It's Kurt Hennig. Kurt Hennig. Okay, this is back around. So you have to raise a hand and to give me the name. Okay, so ready? When you see it, you have to raise your hand. I'm watching that. Who gets their hand up first? No, we raised our hands. I love how Andrew Flint is taking the glasses off. No one knows? 3, 2, 1. Eddie Guerrero. Oh, okay, Andy Mack?
Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, come on.
I'll give you 1 point. I'll give for being clever. Okay, ready? Next one. Here we go. Easels.
China.
Very well done. Very well done. Easels. And by the way, does anyone know her real name?
Oh.
Can't remember.
Taiwan.
Is it J? Pardon? Her initials are JL.
Jennifer Lopez.
Jolene.
Joanna Lumley.
No.
Jocelyn.
No. She's more attractive for me anyway than Jennifer Lopez, but that's my taste.
Learning more about you every week.
This is an interesting moment.
Is it because of the gloves?
Pardon?
Is it because of the gloves?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. No, she's all over. Joni Laurer. Now, of course, the reason why they're all there first is because they're all actually passed away. They're all dead wrestlers. So anyway, that's.
Why are you laughing?
Look at us just laughing at these deceased people.
Okay, right, here we go. This is the odd one out. No, this is the odd one out round. So
It's the worst Royal Rumble ever.
Okay, so Andy Mack and Easton are both on 6 points. Andrew, this is a chance for you to win some points back. Who went first? Easton goes first. Okay, Allison, Ederson, or Jose Sa? Allison, Ederson, or Jose Sa?
I'll give you my reason as well. It would be Jose Sa.
Why?
Because the others are just one. Are they all one syllable? No, they're not. Okay, well, I'm going with Jose Sa anyway.
Okay, I'll keep that. Andy Mack?
I think Alisson played third string to Edison at his Brazilian club, along with his brother, or something along those lines. They all played at the same club at youth level in Brazil.
Okay,
and Alisson behind Edison and his brother.
Okay.
I just get the points if I get it right, though, don't I?
You do. If you're right, you get the points.
Checking.
Okay.
We're wrong anyway.
Well, I'm gonna have to say Edison now. I wanted to say Alisson because I was going to go for most clean sheets in the Premier League, but I'm not sure if that's true. Actually, I'll say Edison then.
Do you know what? Actually, the person who had the right reason is Andrew Flint. So I'm going to give you 2 points for that. So fair play to that. The person who got the correct answer is Isel Cody. So she's getting 15 points.
But I said Jose Sarr as well because Alisson and Edison played together.
Yeah, but you just copied my answer. I clearly.
I gave the wrong reason.
Yeah, but Andy Mac, because we were in second, I'll give you 5 points for it, right? But the answer, the reason Jose Sarr is because he has only 16 clean sheets, whereas Alisson and Edison both had 20 clean sheets this season. So there you go. So
Andrew tied, weren't we? Yeah.
So it's a clean sheets record. Okay, so next one. Liverpool, Leeds, or Man United? This is for Andrew Flint. Liverpool, Leeds, or Man United? Who's the odd one out?
Well, normally I'd say Manchester United because the other two are scum of the earth. I mean, sorry, I don't like them. No, I'm going to have to go with Leeds.
Well done. Well done. And I'm going to give you the reason. They have 101 yellow cards for the season. 101
the most
yellow
ever
cards
in the Premier League.
Yeah,
in a season.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Dirty Leeds, indeed. Andy Mac, down to you. Now, Andy Mac, this could be for the win for you. This could be for a win. So here we go. Liverpool, Everton, Man United. Liverpool, Everton, Man United.
Everton.
Oh, and you're correct because they actually have the most red cards this season with 6. So Andy Mac, you stretched your legs, you reached out in front, and you finished top on 26 points. Isel Cody did very, very well on 21, and Andrew Flint stormed back with 17 points. So Isel, basically, you kind of did a Liverpool where you were like edging ahead, and then Andy Mac stole it from the last one. So you broke your heart. So thank you very, very much. I want to ask, by the way, just before we go away for this week, quick question right now. The equal pay for the US women's and men's soccer teams, where they actually combine the pool of World Cup performances and then divide it equally, but the women, of course, still have all their bonuses. Is it fair, Andrew Flint?
No, because the women should be paid more. The American team, they generate far more income in a very unusual circle. Most countries around the world, the men's team would generate more. So I think the women should be paid more than the US men's team.
That's a good one. Andy Mac?
I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Flint there because they get to the finals and almost win it, and the men's team are rubbish.
Okay. Isel Cody?
Agree, it's unfair, and I think if it was the other way around, they certainly wouldn't be doing it to help out the women.
Okay. On that note, we will finish up for tonight. Say thank you very much to Andy Mac, to Andrew Flint, and to Isel Cody. And of course, we'll see them all next week. Folks, we'll go out. Of course, you can like, subscribe, follow us along, especially on our YouTube. We're broadcasting, of course, every week. We were slightly late this week. There's a bit of some issues, but we got off flying in the end. So again, your comments, your questions are very, very important because it actually helps us to bump up in the ratings as well. So until next week, I'll say thank you very much. And we're saying have a lovely week. Take care of yourselves and each other.